Remember that first Palworld trailer? Cause when we all saw that chipmunk pull out the gun, I feel like we just instinctively knew this would either be the best thing ever or one gloriously horrible dumpster fire of a game. Well, turns out it's both. This thing is plagued by glitches, the story doesn't exist, it's full of bootleg Pokemon, and every human character looks like they crawled out one of those weird mobile game ads. But folks, I got it, and I just can't stop playing it. See, I feel like most parts of Palworld are comically uninspired and often just plain terrible, but somehow, when you put it all together, you kind of get a masterpiece in what I can only describe as a brand new way to make a game not suck. So as I break down Palworld and what makes it work, there are going to be some people in the comments telling me why it's awful and creatively bankrupt, and for the record, you're all literally right. Every point you make, I will probably agree with. But, and I am so confused as I say this, 8 out of 10. Let's talk about why. Oh my, what the First off, the obvious. Palworld is a creature collection game, where you can collect various monsters and put them in your pocket. Hold on, wait a second. Yes, of course, these are all Pokemon, which have been moderately screwed up Mr. Potato Head style to avoid Nintendo's unspeakable wrath. Pokemon in the Pokemon world? Never heard of them. These are pals. Welcome to Palworld.
Approach a wild pal and a battle will commence.
I will say though, much like how great art forgers must learn to paint like the masters before scamming rich people, Palworld really has captured the visual language of Pokemon here, especially with the faces. Gotta say, they do have good taste. Like, they recognized that Quagsire's face is peak design, so they slapped it on this guy and it just works. But yeah, look around and you'll see some very familiar faces among all the pals. To be fair, they do have some fun ideas, and there's actually one thing I seriously do love here, which is that the actual pals have been animated with a disturbing level of care and personality. Like, this is Pangullet, the penguin pal. Let's take a look at how it moves. First, it has a slow walk, then it has this bouncy run, and when it's holding something, it puts it on its head and walks like this. And sorry, you can say what you want, but I am now a Pangullet fan. Well, as we get into the more questionable sides of this game, I really want to show you that it's the animation of the pals themselves that carries Palworld more than anything else. Yes, the pals look like knockoff Pokemon, and everything besides the pals has no personality, but check out this king penguin, who mines with one hand in a dignified, kingly fashion. Oh, and once I overworked my penguin by cranking up the forced labor intensity at my monitoring stand, and because of it, that penguin got depressed, but antidepressants were too expensive, so it would just roam around my base with this dejected expression. Without a single word, the pals communicate 5 times more character than anything else in this game, but luckily they are the most important part. So, the game opens by plopping you on a beach in the mysterious Palpagos Islands. How fun, it's like the Galapagos Islands, but with pals! Well, I hope you love that pun, cause it's more or less the most interesting piece of text in this entire game. Well, maybe aside from the Pokédex, that's pretty fun, but clearly Palworld is more in the gameplay camp of games, and the plot is more of an excuse. Now, of course, that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? When I play Mario, I'm not exactly looking for deep commentary on the human condition, but especially for an open world game, if you don't care about plot, you better have some insane gameplay, or it's gonna get real boring real fast. Well, Palworld seems to be trying to take the Elden Ring route here, where there's an open-ended story that frames your loosely goal-oriented exploration. But I mean, wow. You will be so incredibly bored by every human character in Palworld. It is like they are actively trying. At one point, you descend deep into a hidden cave to discover a mysterious black market merchant surrounded by guillotines and torture devices, and he ends up being the most boring, wet cardboard, soggy cereal, copy-paste non-character of all time. And like, how do you do that? How do you make this boring after all that work? And for however frustrated I might be with the Pokemon franchise nowadays, I gotta say at least they can make fun human characters with actual character traits, and Palworld kinda doesn't even compare here. Knock off all the Pokemon you want, Palworld, you could never make Larry. I mean, at one point I found a human settlement, and I celebrated when a guard there told me he'd do anything for money, because I was like, whoa, this character has a trait. one character trait. That's crazy. Almost nobody else in this game has a trait or a theme or like anything. They're just sort of there, like the rocks or the trees. This person is like, there's a boss you should beat. So I beat the boss and came back, and they were like, there's a boss you should beat. In fact, I think chess has deeper human characters than Palworld, because at least in chess, I'm kind of interested why the queen can run so fast. Now at this point you might be like, damn, it sounds like this game is terrible and you hate it. And I know it does, right? I should hate it, but I can't. And that's because of the gameplay. For this, I went in thinking, oh, they just ripped off Pokemon, but I was simply failing to see the vision. See, they didn't just rip off Pokemon. They ripped off Breath of the Wild. They ripped off Ark Survival Evolved. They ripped off Fortnite. And now, I'm gonna say something crazy. I'm gonna make some wild accusations. But I think these developers might have played Elden Ring. I'm not joking when I say Palworld has possibly stolen more from these games than Pokemon. Which I recognize is a wild thing for me to say, considering this is literally a Pokemon knockoff. But I mean, Palworld really is an iceberg, where the tip is we're copying Pokemon, and from there, all the way down, is we're copying every popular open world game that has ever existed. Personally, I found the Elden Ring stuff especially funny, just because of how baked into the world it is. Like, at the start of the game, you leave that one crumbling structure with that one NPC on the right side of the hilltop, and in the distance, there's an Erd tree they bought off Wish, and down the hill, that's a big enemy you can't fight yet. In combat, of course, you react and spam rolls, and you even got the FromSoft stamina bar.
That's my bar!
Now, of course, Elden Ring didn't invent any of this stuff, but it is very funny to see them all together again in a completely different game. I walked into a church, and I got deja vu, because it was just that one church from Elden Ring, right down to the crumbling bricks, and the flowers on the ground, and that glowing upgrade item in front of the statue. Just some truly baffling stuff going on in Palworld. Want to upgrade and build with a clear UI? We got Bootleg Ark here. Want to climb and glide anywhere you can see? We got Bootleg Zelda here. And listen, I'm sure I'm not even mentioning so many games they ripped off. Like, I heard this was inspired by RimWorld a lot. That game is still on my list right now, but I can't wait to play it and find out how much of its homework Palworld blatantly copied. So I'm actually curious, if you play Palworld, tell me which games you know they stole from, because they did so much stealing that it sort of wraps around and becomes a strength of the game. Palworld is like a combination of every single popular thing, which means it will feel fresh to you unless you've played every single popular thing. Folks, this is no mere level 1 plagiarism. This is a carefully constructed kaleidoscope of almost plagiarism that the developers are transparent about in the funniest way possible. See, Palworld's developer, Pocket Pair, was founded by Takuro Mizobe, who is quite the personality. He gave an interview with Wired Japan that I am Google translating here, but to quote that Google translated interview, "I have a deep-rooted desire for my work to be enjoyed by as many people as possible, and to that end, if there are good ideas in the world, I pick them up. I don't necessarily have to be particular about originality." Damn, I'm glad he cleared that up, because I sure couldn't tell. But, you know, he's not lying about it, and honestly, there's a lot of nuance here that I don't think we should miss. In that interview, he mentions that he's always loved Nintendo games and deeply respects them. And call me crazy, but I do feel like genuine passion was the spoon that stirred this plagiarism stew. Now, for the record, the flame that was cooking that stew was definitely a massive desire for money. But I mean, who doesn't like money, right? Speaking of which, today's video is sponsored by the fraction of a cent of ad revenue that I get if you watch my stuff. I like money, so please subscribe. But actually, I think it's a very toxic idea that doing something for money means you don't really care about it. We see people say this all the time to artists, to developers, and it just never goes away. And oh man, we are seeing this everywhere with Palworld. Eurogamer playing Palworld gives off the impression of playing a product designed to be sold. Like, it is, that's what games are. But listen, when I play this game, and I see these stupid little walk cycles, or the sheer range of mechanics and ridiculous things that happen at camp, it's clear to me that this isn't just some low-effort cash grab. You see, Palworld is a high-effort cash grab, a masterclass of chasing trends, and I gotta respect it. Plus, I can't stress enough how easy it is to combine popular things, but end up with absolute garbage. I tried bacon-flavored ice cream once. I love bacon, and I love ice cream, but it turns out bacon ice cream is a horrible crime against both. So combining all these already successful ideas to make your own successful game, well, I can't help but think that's a process that's easy to make fun of, but maybe not so easy to actually pull off. Igor Stravinsky famously said, "A good composer does not imitate, he steals." Clearly, Igor Stravinsky had just played Palworld. Though, Palworld kinda both imitates and steals, so the jury's still out on that one. But let's take a closer look. How does all this stealing make for compelling gameplay? Well, I think it's because as you progress, the tools and not Pokemon you use are constantly changing, and the core combat mechanics sort of speedrun through every possible way to fight in a third-person game. Early on, you're just doing melee stuff, then you get bows and crossbows, a grappling hook, you catch a dollar store Vulpix and you can pick it up and use it like a flamethrower. Then you're flying on a bird that shoots tornadoes, and then you find sulfur and learn to make basic firearms, and before you know it, you're riding on a giant alpaca that pukes out spirit bombs, cause you need it as a meat shield while you periodically spend 10 seconds reloading an old-fashioned musket. Palworld is at its best when you are constantly finding new strategies and fun ways to combine its many very silly tools, and the pals themselves are designed to make this possible. If it looks like you can ride it, you probably can. If it looks like you can throw it as a grenade, you probably can. And if it looks like you can harvest its organs and use them to make flaming arrows, you probably can. But I mean, you wouldn't, right? It really feels like your character is coming up with ridiculous ideas to make the most of every single pal in a way that I personally loved. Sadly though, this feature was actually plagiarized from real life. You see, once upon a time, someone saw a horse and was like, I bet we could grind up its bones and skin to make jello. And it just sort of worked. There's also that red food dye we make from bugs. I mean, making weird shit from other animals is sort of a human tradition, so I'm glad Palworld has finally brought this fact into the Pokemon space. By the way, on the topic of making stuff, the base management part of Palworld is surprisingly enjoyable too. You quickly learn how effective pals can be at manual labor, and before you know it, you have a sprawling, let's call it a production network, backing up the rest of your morally reprehensible adventures. And I can't lie, it feels kinda great to take a break from all the management, get up on a cliff for a bird's eye view, and just watch all your little guys going about their day. But of course, even this is plagiarized from Temple OS. You just can't win, folks. But touching on those morally reprehensible adventures I mentioned, as you might know, this is a very cynical and brutal take on the creature collecting genre. In fact, I went into it expecting to massively cringe at the whole theme of what if Pokemon was brutal? Because it just seems like a very obvious low-hanging fruit, right? But it's presented here with such a weird sincerity that it kind of won me over. There isn't any blood, all the gory stuff is comically censored, and it never feels like the game is trying too hard to be dark and depressing. It just happens to be a brutal life here on the Palpagos Islands. Pals are friends, and pals are food, and often they want you to be food, and that's just how things are. Oh my god! You want leather? You go outside and you take your musket, and your giant alpaca. This is reinforced by the Paldex entries that describe each pal, which actually do a pretty good job capturing that unhinged energy that the weirdest Pokedex entries have. If it's a cute pal, it'll probably have an entry about how they love murder, or start forest fires, or power the drug trade, but rather than feeling edgy, there's this nature documentary style detachment to everything that makes it kind of endearing. And for all that craziness, the fact that the pals themselves are designed to be so genuinely adorable and expressive means that I actually did feel kinda bad that one time I gave my penguin depression from overwork. In fact, I was so horrified that I quickly eased up the hard labor, built a hot tub for my pals, and put more thought into the quality of their food. Not only that, but when the game incentivized me to turn my weak pals into resources by butchering them, or to melt my pals in a vat to empower the strongest ones.
We can also harvest the souls of pals to then enhance certain stats.
Most of the time I actually couldn't bring myself to, because they just sort of seem like mean things to do to your friends. Weirdly, this makes for some actual fun moral choices when it comes to your pals. A lot of games make it too rewarding to be good, which makes their moral choices very obvious and boring. But in Palworld, doing the wrong thing is extremely rewarding, and it's up to you to decide how far is too far. Now I will say, playing this game without major animal cruelty is the equivalent of a no-hit run in Dark Souls, but the least you can do is to give your pals a reasonably comfortable life, even if you do have 3 penguins working at an assembly line making mountains of 9mm handgun ammo. What I'm trying to say is, I better not see you hit that super hard labor option. You wouldn't do that to legally distinct Goomy, would you? I mean, just look at him. Look at him go. Wait, no, stop. What are you doing?
Creating a productive base like this is the secret to living a comfortable life in Palworld. But be careful not to overwork your pals.
Now, where this does sort of break down is all the horrible things you can do to people. Because as I said before, humans in this game are just wet cardboard, and their AI is some of the worst I have ever seen. And it's not even funny bad, like in Oblivion or something, it's just bad. And because of that, I simply could not care less about any character in Palworld that isn't a pal. So yeah, I might occasionally, capture soldiers in Pokeballs and sell them for gold on the black market, but I don't feel bad for them for the same reason I don't feel bad for Tetris blocks when I clear a line. Now, of course, I'm not asking for Shakespeare here with these NPCs, but I really do wish a single person in this game would have even a crumb of character, so it would feel like your interactions have actual purpose. One thing that does have a bit of actual personality, though, is the soundtrack. It's pretty okay. They got that epic orchestra going on, and then they threw like FL Studio drum samples over it. It has its moments. I'm not a hater. Some things do sound kind of familiar, but that's just how music works, I think. I might just be stuck in that plagiarism detection state of mind. Anyway, now that we've talked about this stuff in the game, we gotta talk about how often it breaks. That's right, it's time for the bugs. Which, as with any open world or early access game, there are a whole lot of. Some were pretty annoying, but miraculously none of them were quite game ruining for me. You do learn the workarounds. Pals refusing to do anything? Simply reload the game. Grappling hook got you stuck flying in midair like Superman? Again? For the 3rd time in 1 hour? Just switch weapons. It's not too terrible for early access. Though fair warning, my perception is a bit skewed here since I've been playing some real buggy games lately. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, if I'm not falling through the floor, I'm having a good time. Alright, I think I cracked the code. Here we go. So, to this game's credit, most things seem to function. No crashes, and I have not fallen through the floor in Palworld yet. I did get stuck inside of a rock once, but technically, I fell through the ceiling, not the floor. And there was also that one time I got stuck inside of a different rock, but I think that was the wall that I fell through. Still not the floor. Okay, yeah, if you really hate bugs, maybe wait a few months before picking up Palworld. Go check out my Palworld movement. Alright, and now I just gotta... The broken part of that video title is very much not for show, even if I do think the gameplay itself is very fun. In fact, I could talk about that gameplay all day, but I feel like it would simply be a waste of your time, because I could just say Ark, Elden Ring, Pokemon, Fortnite, Breath of the Wild, RimWorld, and it more or less covers everything I could talk about. So instead, I want to finish by pointing out how weirdly accessible this game's difficulty options are, to the extent that they're actually some of the best I've seen ever. Like, you have your casual, normal, and hard difficulties, but you can also set it to custom, to specifically tweak every single part of your gameplay experience. From removing hunger and raids, to adjusting the day-night cycle, and even changing the EXP and item rates. Palworld can get pretty grindy as it goes on, but guess what? They literally let you change that if you feel like it's too much. Just pop into the world screen, click change difficulty, and raise the experience modifier. At one point, I found the solo gathering grind was starting to get annoying. What did I do? I just cranked up gatherable drops, so I could spend less time staring at rocks and more time riding on that cool alpaca. And boom, terrible attention span satisfied, problem solved. But wait, while this is an amazing feature, unfortunately, it was plagiarized from the original System Shock in 1994, which invented custom difficulty. Where are the System Shock lawyers? Seriously though, to me, these options are usually a sign of a game that went the extra mile. Sometimes it's called assist mode, like in Celeste or Control, but whatever it's called, I'm a big fan of giving each player the option to customize their experience to whatever's the most fun for them. It is an act of incredible respect for the players and their time, and I cannot believe we are seeing it in the bootleg Pokemon game because, and please don't kill me for saying this, but most of the games it is stealing from kind of just don't care about this. Ark is one of the most infamously time-consuming games out there. Elden Ring, well, that might be one of my favorite games, but it's not exactly known for its accessibility. And Pokemon, well, Pokemon had an easy mode once, and it was something you unlocked after you beat the game on normal mode, which is a game design decision that still haunts me to this very day. Now, I do get that those games have competitive sides and this stuff is hard to balance, but I mean, come on, at least let me mess with the rules in single player. It's not hurting anyone. So, as a gaming enjoyer who enjoys games from a lot of different genres, I can't help but feel like sometimes there are things more games need to steal. Established franchises can get so cozy when they know they have a loyal audience, and sometimes this makes them ignore innovations that could make these games better for everyone. Well, as we've established, Palworld is just a whirlwind of shameless theft. And also, I gotta say, that CEO guy has quite a few hot takes about crypto and AI that do put his company on the precipice of like 5 separate PR disasters. But when he says he wants his work to be enjoyed by as many people as possible, seeing the way Palworld somehow manages to carefully combine so many genres, and then puts in the extra effort to let us tweak every part of it, I can't lie, it kind of makes me want to believe him. Especially when this is like a game that you pay for once, and there's no premium battle pass or awful money stuff, which shouldn't be something I have to praise in a game, but you know how things are now. And listen, if we step back for a bit, I gotta ask, should Palworld really be an illegal level of plagiarism? Well, it's definitely at least close, but I do like it when art styles and mechanics are copied and experimented with, because that is how art has always worked, right? And while a lot of stuff here is clearly derivative, I'm not sure I would love the precedent of it's illegal to draw this funny face, or design an electric zebra, or make a shitty Walmart Lucario, or even have knockoff Pokeballs. I think that could seriously backfire, both legally and in terms of allowing creativity. It's just like that one quote earlier from Igor Stravinsky. Something, steal shit. I forgot the quote. But yeah, I personally do think you should just barely be allowed to go this far. As for whether Nintendo and the Pokemon Company think the same way, well, on January 25th, Pokemon released an official statement called Regarding Other Companies' Games. It does have some very sanitized corporate speak, so to be clear, I'm not a lawyer, but let me try and interpret this legal language for you. It's basically saying, fear us, for we bear the wrath of an angry god, your sins have earned our fury, the seas will run red with Pal blood. So yeah, a bit of a strong stance. Now I will say, there's a lot of different accusations going around. Some people are convinced the pals are AI generated from Pokemon, or the models are literally ripped from the Pokemon game. That would suck, but I tried to find a source for those claims, and for now, they're sorta just made up. But even though the actual characters were made at Pocket Pair by humans, I did see some more convincing comparisons that show how, let's say, deeply inspired by Pokemon a couple of these models are in terms of proportions, basically implying they could be the 3D equivalent of tracing, which is not good. Personally, I'm still not super convinced, because, you know, Pokemon itself did steal a lot of designs from, like, animals, but of course, not an expert. So I suspect Pocket Pair might want to use all that money they made to hire some good-ass lawyers. Also, for the record, I'm recording this in January 2024, so if you're here a few months from now, after some horrifying truth was revealed about Palworld in the court of law, welcome! This was always a possibility. But let me tell you, future viewer, before this game got delisted from Steam for plagiarism, it was pretty good. Maybe you could still find it somewhere. You know, somewhere. And of course, if you're here from the future where Pocket Pair survives getting sued to oblivion by the 500 trillion watt orbital death laser that is the Pokemon legal team, yeah, no, I had faith in them the entire time. Complete faith. No plagiarism at all, probably. Long live Pocket Pair. At least until the Palworld 2 AI controversy in 2027, which will happen. Have that popcorn ready, folks. In conclusion, great game, somehow, with a lot of moments that genuinely made me smile. Now, it might change one day, because I do not think this company has a lot of respect for the law. But right now, Palworld has no microtransactions, no day one DLC, and everything can be customized down to the EXP rate. It is a strangely pro-consumer experience that defied all my expectations, except for some of my expectations which it didn't defy, but in my opinion, it's absolutely worth the $30. Not only that, but they released a very promising looking roadmap for early access, and I sure do hope they can finish it. So again, if you're looking for a story that will inspire you and make you think, maybe don't play Palworld. But if you hate what Game Freak has become, and you want a passionately made Pokemon game by fans with real creative vision, play Cassette Beasts. But if you're looking for a truly unhinged open world sandbox that plays like an ADHD fever dream, Frankensteining 5 different genres together with not a single bit of care for intellectual property law, then Palworld just might be for you. I give this game an 8 out of 10. And a 9 out of 10 if it were sealed in a vault for 100 years and released after Pokemon became public domain.